continue to capture questions, and you can visit our website for some of the responses we couldn't get to today. So if we have one of your questions and you haven't heard the answer, it may be because we're still working on it. I do want to take this time to introduce Chris Benner. He's the project lead for the grant from the Center for Regional Change at UC Davis.
Hi everyone. Home stretch, half an hour more. So I'm from the Center for Regional Change, which was established about 6 years ago at UC Davis, really with the purpose about being a resource and a bridge between resources we have at UC Davis and the broader Central Valley and Sierra Nevada region. We try and do research that's rigorous, that's really relevant for public policy concerns, and that can really reach the populations most impacted by change in the region. We have a strong focus on social equity and sustainability in the region, and we're really pleased to be part of this project and a partner, and thanks SACOG for inviting us in to be part of this. I really want to do 3 things today. One is to give you a little bit of a background on some of the equity analysis that has gone on, both in SACOG and in some of the work that the Center for Regional Change has done in the Central Valley that help inform our work on this project. I want to give you some sample indicators, numbers that we're going to be looking at, and some of the overview of the issues that we're considering in that indicator development. And then really get into some of the specific indicators we're looking at in the performance metrics for this project. It says on the agenda that this is a workshop. Doing a workshop with 200 people is a little bit of a challenge. So my goal today is really to inspire those of you who care about numbers and care about performance metrics to come to a working meeting, to really come out and work with us in detail where we'll have more time, more of a chance for dialogue and discussion to figure out what are the best kind of metrics and performance issues that we should be looking at, not just in this grant and for the final project in this grant, but as we've discussed with SACOG, this is really about part of an ongoing process, right? It's about one set of funding and grant that we have in a long trajectory, and really trying to help think through how do we improve the work that's been done to this date to set a path going forward so we can all be better informed about planning that we do in the region. Now, in the last MTP update, as Casey mentioned, there was an analysis of environmental justice areas, and these are the areas in the region where there is a population where at least 40% of the population in the census block group is less than half of the median income for the region, or where there's a high population of people of color, or both. So these are the places where the disadvantaged communities in our region are predominantly located, and it's in the, no, it's hard to see in the back, it's in the red and the purple colors in the region. And what the analysis in the MTP did was to really look at some of the demographic characteristics of those regions, some of the housing characteristics, land use characteristics, and really link it to this projected scenario in 2035 where there's high frequency transit during commute hours, and really looking at what do residents of those environmental justice areas have access to with transit. And so part of what they looked at is the potential access to medical services, and the graph on the left shows environmental justice areas compared to the rest of the region in terms of access to medical services in 2005 compared to 2035. The graph on the right is access to retail jobs. This is access to all kind of jobs. I don't want to overwhelm you with numbers, and I don't want you to sort of get focused on these specific numbers here, but just to get a sense of this is the type of analysis that was really being done in that work to really get a sense of how can transit changes in the region and land use changes in the region affect access to opportunity in those areas of our region that are disadvantaged. Now, the Center for Regional Change, about 3 years ago, in partnership with a coalition of community organizations in the region called the Coalition on Regional Equity. It's a coalition of housing advocates, labor organizations, environmental organizations, a whole range of groups. Really tried to then look at how do we understand equity in the region and provide a scorecard, we call it. And scorecard really stands for Sacramento Coalition on Regional Equity's Collaborative Assessment of Regional Development. This is a report that's on our website, regionalchange.ucdavis.edu, and was our first attempt to really try and understand the dynamics of equity and opportunity in the region spatially, and to really identify, building on some of that work of looking at the income areas and racial characteristics of the population, but also looking at home ownership, also looking at poverty levels, also looking at some of the environmental exposures in the area, also looking at education achievement. And this is a sample of one of the maps that we produced from that, which just looks at median household income in the region. And all of these maps are structured in such a way so that the color schemes are the same and structured on the same metrics. I won't go into the detail of it. But essentially, red areas are significantly worse than the region as a whole in those metrics, and the dark green areas are significantly better than the regional average, with the other colors sort of in between. So this is just an example of median household income by census tract. We look at some of the home ownership rates by different racial groups. This is just an example of home ownership rate for the Hispanic population, Latino population in the region. We do this for African Americans, Native Americans, Asian populations, etc. Now we have used that analysis to then try and take it to a local level. And this is an example of a report that we've done, short 2-page thing, really looking at, in this case, the Avondale and Glen Elder community, to try and use this analysis and using the geographic information systems, the mapping analysis, to figure out what are a set of priority issues and concerns in target neighborhoods in the region. And so in Avondale, Glen Elder, this looks at issues around the high proportion of the population living in poverty. Majority of households are overburdened by high housing costs and substantial exposure to environmental hazards. So these are some of the issues that emerge when taking that regional scale analysis, but then bringing it down to a neighborhood level. Now, as we go into this work in this project of looking at sustainable communities and sustainable community plan for the region, we're really trying to think on how do we build from the work that SACOG has done today, how do we build on the insights from all of you in this room and all the groups that we have worked with over time to develop really a dashboard set of indicators that are understandable for the general population. And so we don't get lost in this haze of numbers that some of us who spend our whole lives with numbers kind of get blinded to. But we're really trying to come up with those, headline dashboard indicators that can help us understand how are we improving, what are the challenging areas we need to focus on, and how should we develop the priorities. So I wanted to give some examples of indicators that I've seen that I think are particularly useful that pull a whole set of data together in a way that give that headline number. One is called the Genuine Progress Indicator. This was developed by an organization in San Francisco called Redefining Progress, and essentially tried to do is come up with an alternative to GDP, gross domestic product, that tries to look at the whole pie of economic activity in the U.S., but doesn't distinguish between the company that may be polluting the air and causing high environmental and health costs that then people have to pay for, and that becomes an economic positive when we should really be understanding the negative impacts of health problems. So a Genuine Progress Indicator starts from personal consumption, what do people in the country have to consume, adds to that a set of non-quantified value, housework, parenting, volunteer work. How do we account for that and make sure that we're counting that as genuine progress? And then tries to subtract disamenities, costs of crime, loss of leisure time, costs of commuting, costs of pollution, etc. And it comes up with this Genuine Progress Indicator, which is able to show over time how are we doing on a more comprehensive indicator of progress than simply GDP. One of my favorite indicators in this line is the Genuine Happiness Index, or the Gross National Happiness Index. The country of Bhutan actually uses this instead of GDP as their national guideline for policy. And what they tried to do is incorporate understandings of psychological well-being, use of time, community vitality, culture, health, education, environmental diversity, living standards, and governance into a single way of evaluating policy developments that really can promote happiness. I don't know if we'll achieve happiness on this level in Sacramento, but it'll be something to aspire for and think about. This is just another example that we're inspired a lot by. The Kirwan Institute at Ohio State University does a lot of work with community groups around the country and has developed what they call an opportunity map or opportunity index, which they've used in Austin, they've used in Baltimore, they've used in other places around the country, which combines variables in education, 5 different indicators of educational achievement, 5 of economic vitality, 3 of mobility and transportation, 5 in health and environment, 6 in neighborhood quality, and then really try to pull that together into a single index that we can look at on a regional level that can show where within, in this case, the Austin region, are places that really deserve high priority attention because of low economic opportunity or challenges. So as we think about our work and look at these indicators, what do we think makes for a good indicator? Well, first, it's got to be relevant, right? It's got to be related to important values that we as a region share. And that's why we don't want to just adopt tools that have been done elsewhere or sit in our offices and look at the data and come up with something that makes sense, but really have a dialogue with all of you and anyone else we can pull into these discussions to figure out what are the important values and goals that we want to represent in the Sacramento region. And then in developing the indicators, is it understandable and is it usable? And is it usable to SACOG for their ongoing work in helping to guide planning in the region? And is it usable to the constituency that within the region that cares about social equity, that cares about performance in these indicators? And does it help us to understand how land use and transportation decisions and planning processes are not isolated in and of themselves, but in fact relate to opportunity in education, opportunity in the economy, opportunity for health? There's a whole set of issues that are related to how we use land and how we plan our transportation system. And finally, is the data that we're going to be used consistent and reliable? And is it possible to use it to compare over time and between places? And so it can help us understand both the conditions of people in the region and the places that they live. So we're really starting from some of, when I say we at the Center for Regional Change, working from some of the indexes or indices that we have developed over our work in the region over the last 4 or 5 years, and really having discussions with SACOG and hopefully with all of you about how to improve these, how to modify them, how to develop them in ways that are effective. And so what we're really presenting here today is an idea about indices in 3 broad areas. The first is around environmental hazards and really trying to understand what are the exposure to environmental disamenities that different communities in our region face. The second is around social vulnerability, the risk that disadvantaged populations in our community may face. And that's both for the overall population, that's that social vulnerability index, but then also particularly trying to look at youth in the region. The youth are our future, they're an important indicator of where our region will be going, and they'll be leading the region in 2035, so we should really be paying a lot of attention to social vulnerability amongst the youth. And then finally, to really thinking about opportunity. And this is what we really want to be planning for, is how do we strengthen the opportunity for all residents of the region. So what I want to do is in each of these indicators, give you some sense of our preliminary work in this area. And I really want to emphasize it's preliminary. These are ideas. We've done some work behind that and really integrated it together, but we're looking for feedback about how to improve these and how to shape them over time. So the Environmental Hazards Risk Index tries to look at proximity to pollution sources as measured from the Environmental Protection Agency, looking at toxic release sites, at refineries, at hazardous waste treatment and disposal sites, at chrome platters, and then trying to look at the ambient air pollution in the region and an assessment that's done of the total cancer risk because of high levels of air pollution. And when you combine those together into an environmental hazards index, this is roughly what it shows for the region. And again, those red areas are the places that have the highest levels of exposure to these environmental hazards. But then what we've also tried to do is then not just look at the places in the region, but to begin to look at, well,